Hello, on SGX Sector Connect, our focus is on the healthcare sector. Many companies on the Singapore market do represent that sector in some form or another. There is also the FTSE ST Healthcare Index. But as an investor, you have to know the nuance, the detail. You have to delve a little bit deeper to find out what these companies do and which of them are in fact included in the FTSE ST Healthcare Index. Geoff Howie is with me again, who's a market strategist at the Singapore Exchange. So can you just break it down to us? Give us the overview. Actually, what does the FTSE ST Healthcare Index consist of?
Hi Mark, at the moment the FTSE ST Healthcare Index consists of 4 stocks. Now those 4 stocks are all mutual components or constituents of the FTSE ST All Share Index, and they're those 4 stocks that are part of the All Share Index that are designated as belonging to the healthcare industry by the Industry Classification Benchmark. So it's 4 stocks out of what we have 22 healthcare stocks, healthcare related stocks listed on SGX, and then there's another 3 trusts that are listed on SGX that are investing in healthcare related property assets.
Right, so you've got hospital operators, you've got trusts as you've just mentioned. Are there any others?
Sure. I mean that there are 4 major types of healthcare stock. The first is those that provide healthcare services. The second is those that provide medical supplies such as bandages and N95 masks. And then there's also those that provide medical equipment, a little bit more sophisticated obviously than medical supplies. And then the 4th category are the pharmaceutical stocks. Pharmaceuticals that might be bioengineered drugs, traditional Chinese medicines, or in the case of one company that's one of the 6 companies of the pharmaceutical subsector, providing basically animal health care drugs.
So as an investor then, how do you go about even deciding whether or not to invest in any of these companies? What are the key criteria, I should say, that you should look at?
I guess the universal criteria, Mark, for any sector or subsector is obviously it has to be relevant to your risk tolerance, obviously. Thus, you must look at the business model, look at the past performance of the business to make your own judgment whether that particular company is going to be worth you investing in from a perspective of how much tolerance you have for the risk associated with the company. But from an industrial point of view, that there's a lot of diversification in these 22 companies. Obviously, if you're investing in companies that are large in size, you're looking at the upper end of the market capitalisation. You're looking at, for instance, IHH Healthcare, which is the largest by far of the 22 healthcare companies, with a market capitalisation of around Singapore dollar $12 billion Singapore dollars. And then there's also catalyst stocks, which form part of these 22 stocks. Almost, I think, a third of those 22 stocks are actually catalyst stocks, and thus the structure of the stock or the trust, when you're comparing the three property trusts, and where these companies are operating their businesses and the type of healthcare business, as we said there were 4 healthcare businesses, provide a choice that the investor can choose from in terms of deciding which stock is most relevant first and foremost to their risk and their market expectations secondly.
Still, the healthcare sector is a defensive sector. Everybody needs healthcare at all times of the year and at all times of the economic cycle. So in a sense, they're recession-proof, aren't they?
Well, obviously not every stock or sector is recession-proof. The healthcare sector still need patients, and for many of these companies, they still need customers, especially for the pharmaceutical companies. If you wanted to look back into the month of August, which was the weakest month of the year, basically healthcare stocks still fell. But if you're looking at those companies that defended their gains the most, you would be looking at the pharmaceutical stocks and the medical supply stocks of the healthcare industry.
Do we see, is it possible to generalise about the fluctuation, the volatility in healthcare stocks compared to, let's say, riskier companies, and or the dividend? Could we generalise about the amount of money that investors get paid simply for owning the stock?
Sure. In terms of the generalisations, the best structure, again, to put to the healthcare stocks is what type of healthcare field these stocks are related to, i.e. the business of cord life, blood banking and so forth, will be very different to the business of Hall Pa, which is basically providing tiger balm. and traditional and other businesses that they're moving into as well, tourism-related businesses. So there's a great deal of range relevant to the customer.
Finally then, when we listen to the presentations at the SGX Sector Connect seminars and we hear the senior executives from these listed companies talk about their companies, what are some of the key questions that members of the audience should raise their hand and ask about or look out for in these presentations?
We're actually quite overwhelmed by the response of the companies and the representatives of those companies who are willing to take some quite difficult questions. Obviously, we've been able to take home that in these Sector Connect seminars, there are shareholders of those companies who are asking very pointed questions in terms of the expansion plans, past decisions, and the financials of the companies. So while we are trying to present a holistic view of the sector and unearth, I guess, some of the segments of the sector to the investor population, it's been a great advantage to have these company representatives along with us to basically also be able to provide some great feedback to the shareholders of those companies as well.
Geoff, just now you mentioned the trusts. Now, we're probably familiar with retail trusts and office trusts and industrial trusts. What do the healthcare trusts invest in?
We have two real estate investment trusts that relate in healthcare-related property assets, the first of which was First REIT, to be listed, and the second of which is Parkway Life REIT. Now, both of those real estate investment trusts are, as we say, investing in healthcare-related property assets. There's a third trust, and that's a business trust, not a real estate investment trust, that has been recently listed. That's the Religare Health Trust, which is basically investing in healthcare-related property assets in India. That's the first business trust of its kind to be listed that is basically offering healthcare-related assets in India itself.
And trusts, by their nature, actually pay out cash flow rather than profit in dividends. Are there some other key differences, just briefly, that investors in trusts need to be aware of?
Sure. Well, trusts, as we know, are big ticket assets that have cash flow and thus have comparatively provided in the past higher distributions than dividend yields of corporate structures. There's different structures to it. Obviously, they have to be relevant to the investor's risk tolerance first and foremost. But secondly, we're seeing more of these trust structures actually appear on the exchange venue, and that's part and parcel with the big log of infrastructure, particularly the infrastructure with a consumer face that is being built not just in ASEAN but throughout developing Asia, such as the need for medical provision in India.
So out of these four subsectors you mentioned, which ones are most commonly represented? Where do we find the biggest cluster of companies, I guess?
It's the biggest cluster or the most common representation of the companies within the four segments of the healthcare sector would be the segment of the healthcare providers. We have 10 companies listed in these healthcare providers, of which IHH Healthcare and Raffles Medical are the largest, with respective market capitalizations of 12 billion and 1.6 billion Singapore dollars. As you can see from the list, we have 4 stocks that are also listed on Catalyst, as well as a great deal of diversification in terms of the types of services that these healthcare providers are providing the patients and the customers of their businesses. And this is also, I guess, demonstrated in the diversity of price performances in the year to date. You can compare the price performance of Cord Life Group from a percentage gain which was more than 100% in the year to date to Pacific Healthcare, which has declined 31% in the year to date. So there's quite a high degree of variation in terms of the price performances in the year to date, but that is also a variation factor, I guess, that is based on the different businesses that those companies, or the different services and goods that those companies are providing their patients and customers with.
And Geoff, where are we finding the next biggest clusters of companies?
Yes, the next biggest cluster would be pharmaceuticals, of which we have 6 companies producing drugs for 5 of which are producing drugs for human consumption, and 1 of which is providing or manufacturing and distributing drugs for animal health care.
Oh, which one's that?
That is Zagro Asia. And as you can see, the largest 2 stocks of the pharmaceutical sectors are Tianjin Zhongxin and Hor Par Corporation. draw your attention to the price changes in the year to date, you can see that at this stage all those price changes have been positive in the year to date, and thus this has been perhaps the most defensive sector or the most defensive segment of the healthcare sector in the year to date.
Right, because even Zagro is up just a single-digit percentage, but still is actually higher.
And it's just one important point to note that Zagro Asia, that's not its complete business. There's also, that represents approximately around half of its business.
Right, so it's into other businesses
Correct.
as well. And what about medical supplies and equipment? Because we tend to hear a lot of that in the media.
Sure, obviously we hear about medical supplies in terms of the need for bandages or N95 masks when the haze unfortunately crosses the border. We have 4 companies that represent medical supplies and 2 companies that represent medical equipment. The largest 2 of the medical supplies and equipment segments are Biosensors International, which basically represents medical equipment, and Riverstone Holdings, which represents medical supplies. Now, looking at these 6 stocks, you can see in the year to date, the 2 medical equipment stocks have been the more volatile, that's Vic Plus International and Biosensors International, while the 4 medical supply companies have posted or generated year-to-date gains.
So which one would you say is the giant of all the healthcare stocks listed on the SGX?
Well, by size and capitalisation, IHH Healthcare obviously has the 12 billion Singapore dollar market capitalisation as of the end of August. And it also has, I guess, 3 core services that the company is well known for: the clinics, the hospitals, and the ancillary services. And these are not obviously just in Singapore, but are very much operated on an international basis.
Thanks very much, Geoff Howie.